All right. So thanks for joining. This is again, and I am a part of 101 ERP. So we are into SAP, only into SAP, and we have been providing consulting services, training, project services, and all a whole lot of things only in the area of SAP, obviously. And I've been associated with this organization probably since 2010. This is probably my sixth or seventh year, I believe, and my role here is a manager, and I oversee a lot of their programs, from project program to training programs to consulting programs to a lot of other things as well. But so we do these presentations often, and every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, we come up with a topic and we provide these come up with a topic and provide high-level overview on certain topics and also, and which is all already available on our channel. It's on www.youtube.com/go101ERP, our channel. I think I will show it to you guys again. So either way, today's topic is about SAP end-to-end process overview. Now, keep in mind this. We are going to look into SAP end-to-end process that covers APO, PP, MM, IM, WM, SD, and FICO, and how do they integrate from process point of view. And but we're not really going into details of how we set up the system and configure the system and master data setup required and all various transactional possibilities that can be done, which that obviously cannot be done in an hour. It takes several hours to do it. But this is the starting point. The objective is if you are a fresher in SAP, or you just started your career in SAP, or you are trying to manage projects in SAP, it's important that you understand how does all these modules integrate. We are not talking about EDI ALE integration, which is a whole separate topic. It's a different area. But this is how SAP modules integrate within itself. Okay. Some of the initial things that I'm going to go over is going to be probably trivial for some of you guys if you already work in the area, but the focus is going to be new to SAP folks. Okay, that's our primary objective. If you are new to SAP, if you're a fresher in SAP and you're probably focusing on one module, but you're trying to look ahead and trying to lead projects and all, those are the kind of folks who definitely get benefited from this presentation here. So in terms of, thanks for me again, and if you have any questions, reach out to SAP at 101ERP.com, and if you have any questions, clarification, get a copy of this video presentation, whatever it might be, then you reach out to SAP at 101ERP.com. So today's agenda is, so we'll focus on a business scenario. We'll see what the business scenario is in the next slide. And why is there a need for SAP module integration? Why should you know about it? Which modules integrate and why? And we'll go and run through some SAP transaction codes to understand a little bit about what SAP has to offer and all those things. So that's typically what I want to cover. It's hard to cover integration within SAP within an hour, but I'm just going to do my best in case if you have any questions. We have to follow it up afterwards if you don't have enough time, but we'll see what we can get to. So obviously, we all know SAP. At this point, you all know what SAP is, right? It's a software package, and it's one of the best software package in the market. And obviously, the whole purpose of SAP is providing enterprise-level resource planning, processes for businesses. Now, any business, right? It could be retail, it could be manufacturing, it could be, industry-specific businesses, whatever, that education or government sectors, public sectors. SAP has its own, software packages available for various areas of businesses and all, but let's focus on manufacturing for a second, okay? And obviously, because my background in manufacturing, I probably can speak more, or better about that. So if you look, leave SAP, out of the context for a second. If you look at any business, right, any business, you will see, a sales team integrating with customers, sales team integrating with accounts receivable team, accounts receivable integrates with GL account, GL accounts or accounts, from finance point of view. Sales also reaches out to purchasing. Purchasing team reaches out to vendors. Purchasing also works with accounts payable team. Purchasing works with inventory team. Inventory works with shop floor execution team. And production planning work with shop floor execution. And so this is just a very high level overview of, just trying to, get an understanding of every business. The departments within every business really have to work with each other, right? They can't just function on their own, right? That's typically how business works. Every sales department or purchasing or accounts department or an accounts department or inventory department or production department, they all need to work together. And if they don't work together, they're not really having a successful business. And if you're going to implement an ERP solution for a company, then obviously your ERP solution should also have the capabilities to integrate, seamlessly within each other. Okay, so that's typically the idea. If you, in the past, several years before, the concept of ERP is just probably building, and we used to have separate systems or software for separate modules. One company was developing only great finance solutions. One company was developing great, inventory solutions. Some company was developing only purchasing solution, and one company was developing integrations between all these different solutions, right? So if you look at any company, they have about 10, 15, or 20 different major softwares to even run their core business. Like core business, and I say it could be from planning to execution to finance to inventories, the core business areas. That's what I mean. So even to run the core areas of their businesses, it's not just one single package of software. It's tens of 5 to 10 different packages. But those days are gone. Now we are in the era of having ERP system SAP, which has very tight integration capabilities within their modules. Okay, that's the whole point here, right? So within their modules, not talking about again EDI interfacing with suppliers, interfacing with customers, and all within their modules. So how does these modules integrate on? And for what business, functionalities calls for that is what we will look into the next set of slides here. So let's take a business scenario here. So let's consider an industry that manufactures products and sells them to various customers through the distribution center. So demand planning, or forecasting is a key business process that allows the business to predict the future demand of the products. Typically, once demand planning is done, supply planning is carried out. And then eventually the demand plan is, fed into the core ERP ECC system for execution. And the core ERP ECC system, that's where the production planning is carried out. So we do MRP, MPS, in the manufacturing facilities based on the demand of the distribution center, which will also drive procurement proposals being created for raw materials that are required for manufacturing. Once required raw materials arrive in the warehouse, production process is done, the products are available. So once the products are made, manufactured, they are being shipped to the distribution centers to increase the stock situation there. Once sales order comes in the distribution center, then the product is shipped out of the distribution center. So it's a very simple laid out process. Okay, there is no complexity in this process. We are basically saying we are looking into a manufacturing industry. We do demand planning, we do supply planning, and then both are sent to ECC system for execution. Okay, and that's where we do production planning, we do materials management, we do inventory management, we do warehouse management, and then eventually we also, do finance activities and all those different things. And we also have distribution, all happening in the ECC system. Okay, ECC, system itself has several modules within it. And APO is a separate system. We are looking at two different systems at this point. So let's quickly look into our, ECC system. Now, obviously, this is SAP ECC system, and if you look into logistics and accounting, human resources, there are three major sections in ECC. Accounting, obviously, has for financial accounting, controlling, and all those different things. HR, this is our HR, and But logistics, if you look at logistics, you will see materials management, inventory management, which is a border materials management, or not just border, it integrates other modules. We have sales and distribution. This is warehouse management. Then we have production planning, plant maintenance, quality management, project systems, and all these different modules. Now, ABAP is a programming language. We tend to call ABAP as a module, but ABAP is a programming language that is used in any of ECC or ABAP system to build our own screens, our transactions, our process, and all, which standard SAP cannot, when standard SAP cannot fulfill business requirements. Okay, so that's typically what ABAP is. Don't confuse yourself, as ABAP is a programming language rather than a module itself. So either way, so that's typically a number of modules that you see here. Coming back to a business scenario here, so let's look into this slide here. If you look at the slide, we have different systems. We have ECC, which is what our execution system. ECC stands for Enterprise Central Component, which is our latest version, but we are going towards S4 ERP, on HANA, which is the very near future. How near and how futuristic is not, it all depends on a lot of things. But then obviously we have BW, and then we have APO, demand planning, SAP IBP, supply planning, APO and supply planning. And you see the way they all integrate. The ECC, you all know, it's an execution system, right? That's where we do production planning, we do materials management, we do sales and distribution, we do finance and controlling, we do inventory management, quality management, plant maintenance, and all those things. But from planning, let's come back to a little bit and say, look into the planning point of view, right? So when you're planning a product, right? So keep in mind, we are a manufacturing industry. We're trying to plan a product at this point. So ECC provides enough data to BW system, and BW provides data to APO system. Now in APO, we have two major modules. One is demand planning module, one is supply planning module. Now, the demand planning module is where the demand planners in an organization comes up with what we call it as a final forecast. And supply planning is done by the supply planners in the APO system to come up with, what is the equivalent supply plan. Demand plan is one thing, supply plan is another thing, right? In some companies, we have initiatives like IBP, Integrated Business Planning, which is an IBP, which is what IBP is. The SAP has its own SAP IBP solution. All companies can manually do IBP on Excel sheets, or they use other software to do IBP solution and all. But basically, that particular module integrates both APO, demand planning, and supply planning module. Now, the ultimate goal of demand planning and supply planning module is to plan. Okay, plan what is my demand. When we say demand, it's like how much am I going to sell, right? That's what demand is. How much are we going to sell in March, April, May, June, July for the next 18, 24 months? Now, okay, so you decided, demand planners decided what much they want to sell, but how much can we make, right? So we have factories, we have one or two factories, and we have a sourcing department where we can probably subcontract to different vendors. So supply plan is about coming up with, okay, so in March, the demand plan is 1,000 units, but my supply plan is only 995 units. I'm short by 5 units. And or my supply plan could be, increased by adding extra capacity or by providing extra funds to get more laborers to make the product. So that's what the IBP meetings are all about. They actually come up with a best demand and supply plan that is actually acceptable for the organization, not based on demand planners, everything happens. It also happens based on the company's strategic goals. The company may say, okay, our plan is to sell 1 million units next year, so how are we going to achieve it? And a lot of things go into coming up with a good supply and a good demand plan that actually gets fed into SAP ECC module before we go into execution, okay? So, but why do we have BW in the picture, right? So keep in mind, to make demand planning happen, there's a lot of data required. The forecast and sales history are loaded into SAP APO demand planning module that will be used for final forecast calculation. and evaluate using SAP IBP or any IBP solution. And so if you look at the demand planning module in SAP, APO module, it takes a lot of feed from ECC. So it takes data from its sales history. Now, we sell a lot of products, there's a lot of sales or a lot of deliveries, and they all need to be considered before demand planning module really works. We have statistical forecasting, and demand planners have their own way of doing forecasting, whatever it might be. End of the day, the demand planning is done, with all the data that is being fed from ECC to BW to APO. Okay, that's typically, a lot of companies follow that. We can't just rule out the fact ECC can connect directly with APO. We can, but typically it's done for demand planning purposes, done through BW, and a lot of companies do that. And supply plan. And on the other side, supply plan is about planning your factories, right? So now make sure do you have enough capacity? Do you have enough labor and machine availability? And can I make those products? And even for supply planning to happen, ECC need to integrate with APO supply planning module, right? You have to feed in your routing information, your work center information. You have to feed in, your material information. There are a lot of information, that bill of material. They all need to go into in the APO module. Only then, the supply planning can be successfully executed. And eventually, if you look, the demand plan output of demand planning, output of a demand plan is transferred into ECC again, and output of supply plan is also transferred into ECC again. So demand plan value output goes into the selling plant, and supply plan output goes into the manufacturing plant. So you should clearly see a difference here, right? So because demand plan is about how much you're going to sell, and supply plan is about how much you're going to make, right? So those values get fed into manufacturing plants and selling plant or distribution, sometimes distribution centers or the selling plants. And then eventually, sales order comes into the selling plant, and if the stock is available, it gets shipped to the customer. And in order for the stock to be available, that's why we do all the supply planning. If you plan your supply or manufacturing in advance in time, you can ensure the stock is made, your products are made, and they are sent to the distribution center before the sales order comes in, right? That's the whole point of all these great planning that we use with the great, variety of tools. Your company spends millions of dollars in getting these BW, APO, IBP, and all these integration things set up and running. It's a very, tricky process. It's a high volume process, and it's not a area where a lot of people, a lot of companies really great about. They always have problem with planning. Either way, so let's go quickly look into APO for a second. So if we look at this, is obviously APO system. So in APO, we, obviously, like I said, ECC is a separate system, APO is a separate system, and in APO we have two modules. One is obviously the demand planning module, another one is supply planning module. So let's look into a demand planning, and within demand planning, you have interactive demand planning book. That's what the demand planners actually use on a day-to-day basis to come up with the final forecast and send that forecast to the distribution center or a selling plant, right? So that's what they're saying. Okay, we did all we could, and this is how much you are planning to sell in this month, this month, this month, this month, this month, for the next 18 or 24 or whatever 12 months they're going to do it. So the interactive planning book is basically looks like an Excel sheet here, and I just have two key figures listed here, but once once all the setups are done, once you are able to, load your forecast and do your statistical forecasting or manual override, there are many different concepts goes into before the demand plan finally gets created. And this final forecast that I'm trying to load for a material here, it gets loaded into ECC system. You see that there's a forecast of 100 units in February, 101 in March, and 99 in July, August, and so on, right? So this forecast, this particular row, is what they finally come out with. You just have 2 rows here, which are 2 key figures here, but eventually you will see 7, 8, or 9 key figures depending on variety of things business decides and how to come up with the forecast. Okay, now setting up this APO process in itself is a whole separate project. They have to get the business involved, they have to get the consultants involved or analysts involved to come up and figure out, okay, here's my selling plan to selling plan to distribution center, and here's my final forecast that I'm sending. And keep in mind, usually they don't forecast, for February, March, and April and all. They're only looking at future, right? So and obviously, and the more future that they're trying to forecast, the more closer we get to the future, the values becomes more finite or more reasonable, right? So that's typically how the forecasting is. And forecast is not accurate, it's just forecasting, right? It's just forecasting. And they try to do the best in, keeping up within the threshold of forecasting, values and all. So if you look at this final forecast from APO module, gets sent to ECC for execution, the selling plan. So let's look at the selling plan. Now I'm in the ECC system here. Let me go to a transaction called MD63. Guys, please put yourself on mute here and go back. Okay, hopefully you can see me, you can hear me, right? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Guys, put yourself on mute. Thank you. All right, let me get into another system, ECC system, obviously. So basically, I'm actually looking into the forecast that gets loaded into ECC system. If you look at these values here, you will see the same values that we saw in our demand plan, that the final forecast that was done demand planning, 100 and 100 units. And this value from APO gets transferred into ECC system. And the transfer of that value from APO to ECC is also done by consultant analysts. Everything that I'm talking about is all done by consultant analysts, obviously, except running the transactions itself, which is done by the business. So once we have this value in our ECC system, what happens is, business can, they can either directly, use these values as a Bible and they can just execute them, or they can do what they call as a long-term planning. They can, in this process, we are actually not making this as an active plan. We are making this as a plan which is inactive, and this inactive plan can be used in a long-term planning process, which is a part of ECC production planning module. Even though it's a production planning module, keep in mind, it can be done for selling plan, also manufacturing plan. Typically, it's just for manufacturing plan, but selling plan can also come up with a good plan before they go into execution. Okay, so that's typically what happens next. There are transactions like MS04, which is obviously, we have to set up what we call the planning scenario for those products in your selling plan, and that will basically list all the forecasts that we just saw. Like keep in mind, MS04 is a simulated, MRP process in SAP. It's not the actual demand management transaction. So if you look at all these are the planned independent requirements that we just sent for APO module. We capture them as a scenario. This is what we call as a what if scenario. What if, I create a scenario, for what if this, what if that. When you're setting up these scenarios, you will come to know what those parameters are to come up, and working with business will give you more information. But either way, if you look at this, we are capturing these forecast or demand plan from APO, and we are running simulated MRP to come up with a receipt requirement. And if you see, when I'm running these, when I ran MRP last time, it said I'm actually going to get these receipt from another plant, which is obviously a manufacturing plant. So selling plant in this case, which is our distribution center, is sending a signal, not yet sending signal because we are still in simulation manner. And we are sending that signal to M200, which is obviously our manufacturing plant. So once the demand signal goes to manufacturing plant, the manufacturing plant will run into MRP and they make their products and all, which will look in a real bit in a few minutes here. So, but this running of this simulated MRP will give the demand planners or the planners in the distribution center an understanding of, okay, what are we looking at for the next several months? What are we trying to buy from our manufacturing plant? So once they see, okay, this looks good, this is the plan I want to execute, or they can go and manually change the quantity of the what SAP is proposing. Even though I know I can, SAP says I'm going to sell 100 units, but I'm going to buy 100 units eventually from manufacturer. I'm going to change the quantity to 10 units, so whatever that is. So once I make the change, and SAP obviously adjusts the quantity to 10 units instead of 100 units, and this can be sent into an operative plan. Okay, so now all we are doing is a long-term plan, which is simulated way of running MRP. Once we like our plan, we send the plan to demand management in SAP, which is a part of production planning module as well. So that's typically done with another transaction, MD43. If you go to MD43 for your product, and you can pick and choose, which scenario are we running. In this case, 888 is our scenario, and I'm actually going to adopt whatever values that I have there, and then eventually, and I can use this, and once I save it, this value goes into the actual demand management module, which is nothing but MD04, which is a very important transaction in logistics. So MD04 is a transaction where it gives you an understanding of all that's going on with respect to the materials, receipts and requirements, and current inventory situation. So if you look at this material, I don't have stock in my distribution center, which is my distribution center, but I have a 2 purchase requisition open, and I have 2 planned orders sitting out there that is yet to be converted into a purchase requisition, and I already have a purchase order sitting out there. Okay, so that's how you read them, right? So if you look at the way, they all are receipts that actually is being, that was created as a result of the MRP process and all. But now, why do we have purchase requisition here? Because if you look at the master data setup for this material, we are actually buying the product from other plant, which is obviously a manufacturing plant. Technically, if you're manufacturing plant, the stock transfer from another plant. That's how it is set up. So that's why MRP knows to send a demand signal to a manufacturing plant. So when the manufacturing gets the demand signal, and they react to it immediately as soon as they get the demand signal. So if you look at them, so basically we are at the selling plant running MRP, and we are creating a stock transport order to ship the product from the manufacturing plant to distribution plant. So let's pause here for a second, okay? Might be too much for a lot of you guys here, but let's pause here for a second. So what we just saw is we saw demand plan being done in APO, and then we transfer the demand plan to inactive plan independent requirements in our ECC system, and we did our long-term planning, which basically simulated, and we converted some of the long-term planning results into the actual operative plan that's being considered in the MRP of the selling plan. So we already have an integration between demand plan, PP demand management, PP long-term planning, and then MM also here. Okay. So the reason why we have PPMM integration here is because when you run MRP at your selling plant, you know, uh, you're basically, creating proposals to buy your finished products from your manufacturing plant, right? Keep in mind they both could be in the same company code or two different company codes, but the same organization. That's typically how the supply chain really works in many organizations. So, and then and that point, when you have all your master data configuration, every step you need everything, but once it's all set up, you will create what we call the stock transport order to move the stock from your manufacturing plant to distribution center. Let's look at the stock transport order for a second. So if you look at this is MM, and this is PP. Obviously MRP. I should not say it's, even though we have demand management, MRP, they all are part of PP in SAP, but they're technically integrated with many modules. MRP integrates with PP, integrates with IM, integrates with MM, integrates with SD, so it has a lot of integration. So if you look at this stock transport order, the supplying plant is listed here. Okay, that's where you're getting this product from, and here's my finished product, here's the quantity, and I need it on this date. And obviously my my plant is which is my distribution center here. And this item category U basically says it's a stock transport order. And all these master data and data all gets copied as a result of all the settings that we do up front. And if you see this purchase order or a stock transport order, which is a part of MM ending with 341, will be reflected in the manufacturing plant also. If you look at M200, which is a manufacturing plant, 341 is being reflected here. Not only that, it also reflects a lot of other elements that you see in the manufacturing, distribution plant, like 191, 192, and all is probably the planned orders that are sitting out there. All this, in this case, purchase requisitions. So M200, which is obviously the manufacturing plant, you see this 341 as a requirement here. So the minus is requirement. If you see a plus, it's a receipt. Okay, that's how you read MDO4. But why do you have a receipt here is because when you run MRP for this finished product in your manufacturing facility, SAP creates this, proposals, okay, so I have a requirement and I'm creating a receipt, and obviously it will not create a production order immediately. It will create a planned order. The planned order gets converted into a production order, and the production order gets executed. So now we are basically driving again from PP integrating, MM integrating, again with PP integrating in the manufacturing plant, right? So either way, so once the production order gets created, then other things happen. But let's take a quick look here. So if you look at, so we run MRP at manufacturing plant, and that also drives us to buy the raw materials from suppliers. Okay. So now when you run MRP at a manufacturing plant, you are typically running MRP at the whole plant level, or they could run one by one. At the end of the day, they need to run MRP for all the products there. So when they run MRP for a finished product, and a finished product has a bill of material, right? So they do have a bunch of raw materials needed to make the finished product. So that's where, again, MM integrates as well. So if we go back to MDO4 transaction, and this is my finished product, and if you look at CSO3, which is obviously our finished product in the manufacturing plant, they're looking at the bill of material, and you'll see all these materials are required in making this finished product. And if you look at a material here, which is a raw material, and it's a raw material, and obviously this material needs to be purchased. So since we ran MRP for the finished product, let's look at, how our MDO4 looks like for our raw material. What are the raw materials? So the raw material, if you see, okay, it did create a purchase requisition for 1,200 units, because based on our quantity that we set up on the material master, and based on our, lot sizing that we have set up on our, whatever that material master, and bill of material, they all get considered, and looks like they also have a safety stock set up, which comes from material masters. So I think, yeah, so we have a safety stock of 1,200 units. So anyway, so all these various different parameters goes, and it creates a purchase requisition. Now in this time when we have the module integrate, it's actually creating a purchase requisition so that it can be sent to our suppliers to buy the products for the raw materials. So let's look at the purchase requisition. So obviously we have the purchase requisition gets created with existing master data and all this. You don't have vendors assigned here, but eventually when you convert this purchase requisition into a purchase order, you assign source and where you're going to buy and all those things. Once you create your purchase order as a result of purchase requisition, you send your purchase order to your suppliers, right? So your suppliers will ship the products to you, and once you bring the product into your warehouse, that's typically where or when your production can happen. Without raw materials, we can't consume. But keep in mind, we would have planned everything in such a way that when the production order comes in, we would have at least some safety stock or at least raw material left before we, start our production process. If it's a make-to-order scenario, if the products are expensive, we'll probably wait till we get our production order and then we, buy the raw materials. But typically, companies will try to stock some amount of inventory that has high lead time or expensive or it's not available immediately and all those things. And companies decide different ways of how much of safety stock to keep or what raw materials and when to, if they have short lead time, they can probably buy immediately as soon as we get a production order and all those things. But anyway, so once this purchase requisition gets converted into a purchase order, what happens next is it gets sent to the supplier. That's where SAP EDI gets integrated, right? So our ALE EDI process comes into picture. So if you look at WE02 transaction, you will see, all these purchase orders. Hopefully I'll see some purchase orders here. So orders is obviously a purchase order that gets sent to suppliers. So if you look at this particular IDOC, what we're seeing is an IDOC. So basically you're sending an IDOC to this particular partner, and obviously, so the information, this is a purchase order that's being sent to the supplier. So let's open up this purchase order transaction. So here's our vendor, and obviously here's the material. So obviously the example that I took is different than this because obviously we didn't execute the transaction. So here's another material that was prepared for a different purchase organization, company code, and sent to a supplier. So same process applies. When you're trying to create, once your purchase order gets created, it gets transmitted to a supplier, and that's all based on your output determination process and a lot of other things goes in the picture. So here we have an output condition that's assigned to this particular vendor and goes through EDI for this partner and got executed successfully, and that's why you see an IDOC got created here in the first place. So once you see an IDOC, it's a green status. It obviously means it's sent out of your SAP system. But that doesn't guarantee that IDOC was received successfully by the supplier, right? But it's being sent out. If you look at the status of the IDOC, you will see in this case it basically says it's sent to the port. That's all we can say. And once it goes out of your SAP system, you will have middleware system. Then obviously middleware system like Gentron or OpenText or Innoviz. A lot of companies offer middleware solutions, and this purchase order information gets transmitted routed to the supplier, correct supplier, based on the partner information here. You could be sending hundreds and hundreds of purchase orders to 100 different suppliers based on what your production quantity, raw material that you need to stack up for your production process, and eventually suppliers will receive this purchase order, and they actually ship the product to your manufacturing facility. That's what happens next. But this is where obviously our SAP MM integrates with EDI process. Now EDI is a global terminology. It's within SAP world we call them as ALE. ALE process helps us to create necessary IDOCs or documents required for EDI transmissions. And every transaction has a particular EDI, number associated with it, like 850 is a purchase order, 856 for advance shipment notification, 810 is finance related, a lot of different numbers assigned to various different transactions. And typically you will not as a functional SAP guy or analyst, you will not be involved in the third-party middleware system setup and all, but you'll work with them. You'll work with them in making sure they understand the transaction you're sending, the value that goes under the field. So it's important you understand the IDOC, details and all. But either way, let's go back to our presentation again here. So if you see, at this point, we ran a MRP manufacturing facility. We created we did a procurement process for raw material at the manufacturing plant. We were able to interface PO to suppliers, and then what happens is you actually get the receipt of raw material into the manufacturing plant, right? So that's what happens in the next step. Now, right now, we don't have raw material in my plant, right? So once supplier ships the product to me, in this case, I'm the business here. So what the warehouse personnel will do is they actually go into MIGO transaction, like slash and MIGO is a transaction which is commonly used for goods receiving, purchase orders. So they basically go into this transaction, put in this code, and obviously I don't know what other values are there, but so then obviously it brought up what are we expecting to receive, and it says okay, the movement type you're posting is 101, okay. And what's the material, what's the quantity, and where are you bringing the inventory into, which plant are you bringing the inventory into, and all those other various information gets automatically brought in from purchase order and other master data and all. Now, if you look at the fact here, this automatically showed 101, and it's all based on settings, but this is a very important piece to understand inventory and finance integration, okay? Now, finance would have already integrated at least one step before when you have your purchase order, created. So when you look at your purchase order, so obviously, so at this point, what happens is, we brought in the dollar amount here, which obviously comes from info record or master data. At the same time, we have condition records that, if we set up correctly, it brings up, okay, what's the, how much tax are we going to charge, or freight are we going to charge, and all those various things there. But either way, so that gets the data, but no accounting entries are typically posted until until you do your MIGO transaction. So depending on the movement type that we use, sometimes we use movement types that does not post values. Sometimes we use movement type that does not post inventory transactions. So value update and quantity update are two important things that goes along with a movement type in SAP. Okay. So when you do a movement type 101, which is a standard SAP movement type, we do both quantity update and value update. And also depends on the material type that we're using too. So a lot of things that goes into the picture, what type of material, what type of movement type are we using, and and what kind of item category that we are setting up on the purchase order. They'll all determine which account to basically go and hit. Okay, when it comes to goods, receiving goods from suppliers, at this point you have MM and FI integration going on, right? And MM, IM, and FI integration, obviously. So at this point, once the material document gets posted, you can see them in the MB51 transaction, and I'm just going to basically execute MB51 to see whatever data I can get. You see a lot of 101 movement types have been posted. Let's see if I can pick. And so once you do your goods movement, what happens is you create what we call as a material document. Okay, that's a document that basically says, it's obviously a legal document that says how much stock did we receive and where did we receive it into, and obviously this does not give me right there that I wanted. Let's pick another one. Give me 1 second. All right, so I pulled some material document here from the past, and obviously what happens eventually when you pass on to next year and next year, you end up deleting older documents or archiving older documents and all. But so if you try to look at old documents, sometimes you may not find, but that could not be the only reason here, because this is a test system and they may not have created any proper documents and all. But if you look at this material document that is posted, it's a 101 movement type, which is what it's a goods receipt transaction for a purchase order. And if you look at the accounting document here, it does not have an accounting document. It's also a bad example. All right, so if you look at this document, it's a good example. So this was posted in 2015 for a different company code, and if you see, there is a raw material account hit and also hit a GRIR, a clearing account, and other accounts depending on how we set up our condition types and all those things, and account determination process and all. But two accounts are hit. One is obviously our raw material account saying that we received inventory, right? So it goes up. And we're also hitting another account, which is a clearing account, which says, okay, so I need to reduce the value, because eventually this clearing account will serve for the accounts payable team to pay the suppliers, and this clearing account will become zero. End of the day, the clearing account needs to be zero. But that's typically how the FI and MM integrates. IM and FI integrates here at this point. So moving on. So we know at this point we ran MRP, we received inventory, and we had inventory accounting, which is increase in stock happen, and you can see that increase in stock in various transactions. One of the transactions is MMB. In MMB, if you go and execute for a particular material and all these various combinations, obviously. See if I can pull any data here. So this basically comes up and say how much stock will I have in unrestricted quality inspection reserved or out of whatever it is, right? So these are all called as buckets or stock categories basically. So when you look into inventory management, where when you have a stock or a material, typically the materials are in unrestricted use. Basically, they're available either to be sent to a distribution center or to be sold to customers, or it's can be used for manufacturing, depending on what type of material and all. But if there's quality inspection, that's probably where QM module integrated. And if we have reservation, that's for a different process. And all these different buckets basically say what's going on with that particular product in your inventory or in your inventory managed storage location. So either way, that's what happens. And once you receive your stock, inventory goes up, and it also hits your accounts, your GL accounts for your supplier, your clearing account, inventory account. At the same time, when you do your when finance team takes care of, once obviously supplier will send the invoice, and we do our own transaction, and we process payment and pay your suppliers. That's typically accounts payable processes, and GRIR clearing account gets netted out, and eventually the vendor's account gets hit with however they need hit. And at this point, we planned our raw materials, we brought into our inventory, and we increased our inventory for the raw materials. Now, next thing obviously happens is production process, right? So keep in mind, we were at a situation where we were looking into our a production order that was created as a result of demand that came in from our distribution selling plan, and that drove us to create a planned order, and eventually create a production order. Let's look at the production order for a second. So if you look at the production order, basically it says how much quantity that I need to make, and when are we going to make those products, and it also says which machine I'm going to make this product. And if you go into the machine or work center or resources, you're basically going to say, I need to spend time on setup, machine, and labor, and I have formulas for calculating the capacity, scheduling my orders, costing. All those various formulas are set up here on these machines, and eventually, and also this production order will give me, how many quantities are required, which which raw materials are required, those things. All these raw materials that we just saw from bill of material all copied onto the production order. This all can happen only because you have the process set up and configuration done, setup done, master data done. Only at this point you can have a production order created. So what happens in the next step is once the production order, is created, even before in some processes, the best practice is to do your capacity check, availability check, all those things well before your production order starts, production process starts. So what they do is availability check. They check and make sure all these raw materials are available or not. They also check the capacity is available or not. When I say capacity, all the work center busy or it's available, right? And also scheduling my order, right? Scheduling is when am I going to start making my product. So when am I going to start my operation number 10, operation number 20, 30, 40, 50, and all those things. This one says I'm going to start on the 12th, which is 2 days back, obviously, and I'm going to end on whatever, the 5th month, obviously, the test data. So once this particular product, is obviously made, right, as a result of the production process, next thing we do is we confirm your production order and you calculate cost. That's where, again, FI integrates with PP. So when you create your production order, we calculate cost. At the same time, when you finish your production order, we calculate the actual cost, So there will always be difference, or there will always be, there may be difference between actual and the planned cost, and that turns into variance, and that hits a different GL account. So once we do a production order, right, so what happens is, as a part of a confirmation process, once we finish our execution, we actually do what we call goods receipt. That's also similar to the goods receipt that we did for raw materials that we received from suppliers. We are doing a goods receipt for a production order for a production process, and that's typically, that also increases the finished product stock. So once the finished product stock gets increased, that is available for quality inspection. So that's typically where QM module gets integrated here. We'll go back to our slide here. So you have production execution happens and confirmation done, and then we have costing integration to come up with plan with the actual cost. Then and then there are at the same time we have to consume the raw materials, right? So in the manufacturing process, keep in mind all the products that we may plan using MM and got into inventory is being consumed here into manufacturing. So we reduce our inventory situation for raw materials. Then obviously at that time we also do QM inspection. If you have QM model created, in SAP, if you go to QA32 transaction, it can give you, all those inspection lots that got created as a result of your 101 movement that we did for finishing your finished product process. Obviously, it's an example here. So for a material, if you have your QM process set up, you can create what we call an inspection lot. Once the inspection lot gets created, somebody has to go and release the stock before it can ship to the distribution center. So inspection log obviously is a process where they go and they use the decision record results and all those things. Only then, stock can be released. Now, this is where QM integrates. Okay, so when you have a stock in the inspection, in inspection process, when you do MMBE, I don't know if you have any stock available in this material. Okay, good. At least it shows something. You will see the stock in quality inspection. So, or it could be in a different bucket, a block bucket, whatever, depending on how we set it up. So once the inspection is done, QM module inspection lot is done, and they release the stock is available back in unrestricted. Only stock in unrestricted can be moved to the distribution center. So until that point, we cannot move the stock to distribution center. So obviously, as a next step, once the QM inspection is done, once the stock is released, you go back to your MDO4. So you have your, your purchase order, right? So that's the demand signal from your distribution center. You ship your finished product against this purchase order to the distribution center. So once the stock is in transit, obviously, once it leaves our manufacturing facility, it is actually attached to this purchase order, which is a stock transport order, and it goes to the distribution center. And eventually, in the distribution center, what they do is, depending on whether it's an free trade zone or whatever regulation they have in the distribution center, they either create inbound delivery document and they receive stock into their warehouse or distribution center. So what happens is as the next is, so once the stock really goes out of the manufacturing facilities, they get received into the selling plan or distribution center. That's what IM again integrates. Now, if you have WM implemented, what happens when you do your goods receipt in your selling plant or distribution center, right? WM, as a part of WM process, we create transfer orders. That's a put-away process. So transfer order gets created, and somebody goes and looks in the transfer order, brings the stock from the receiving area, and put it away in respective bulk storage location, high rack storage location, or open source. However, we set up how we store our finished products. Now, distribution center not only gets products from one single facility, manufacturing facility, it brings in stock from a variety of facilities. And depending on the product, we store it away, put it away in a different locations, and the configuration master data will help that to happen. So once obviously it's put away, the product is available in the distribution center. Okay, so now we did our planning in APO, we did our execution, PP execution, MM execution, managed inventory, did our QM process. Eventually, we did our stock transport order process. We brought our stock into the distribution center. Now the stock is available. Okay. Now we did everything in such a way that the stock is available before the product comes in. Sometimes we do our planning in such a way that the stock is available in the distribution center for 2 months worth of sales order that can be put in. Okay, we plan it in such a way. Some companies will plan for 15 days. Some companies will plan for 30 days. Some companies will plan for 3 days, 3 months to 4 months or 6 months, depending on the volume of product, depending on the season. They all plan ahead in such a way that the stock is made available in the distribution or selling plant even before the sales order comes in, well before the sales order comes in. The company will not take risk in cancellation. Now comes our sales and distribution module, right? Now keep in mind our sales and distribution module is already integrated previously with our through BW, through APO demand planning. It has already fed in previous sales history and shipment information and all. And obviously because of that and all other factors, we came up with our demand plan. And now our sales and now what happens is customers can place a sales order. Now sales order can come in as a part of our as an EDI transaction too. So when you go back to your SAP and if you look at WE02 again, you can potentially see sales order being put in. And you should see that as an inbound transaction. Obviously, we don't have anything yet here, but you see
orders are inbound. So what we did before for MM is sending out purchase orders, which is outbound. Now anything coming into our system, we call it inbound. And when you receive your stock when you receive your IDOC into your system, then obviously the IDOC gets processed, and the next step is you create sales orders. Okay, so sales order gets created in SAP, and if you see VA03, so as a result of EDI process, sales order is created, or it could be a result of a manual sales order creation in VA01. Somebody can pick up the phone call and take sales orders on the phone, right? So then, obviously, we reference our customer's PO number in if needed, and then who's the sold to party, ship to party, basically the customer's information, which material you are trying to ship, and when are they expecting this product to be received, and all various other details that goes into it. When we receive our sales order, we have our FI integration, we do credit checks, and we also do availability check, and before we promise our customer, which is our ATP process and all. So once the sales order is successfully created, this sales order information is also seen in MRP. MRP does consider a sales order into consideration if you want it to. Typically it does. All right. So now obviously this can also signal demand to the manufacturing plant if our sales order is higher than forecast. So this is what called as a sales over forecast. Now, we forecasted 1,000 units as a part of demand planning. Our supply planning is for 1,000 units, but we got a sales order of 1,500 units. We are way above than our forecast, right? That's a significant impact to the supply planning process. So obviously that can signal more demand. Again, the whole process starts all over again. PP kicks in, MRP happens for finished product, MRP happens for raw materials. We again make the product, we do quality inspection, the whole thing happens again, and it goes as a cycle of on and on and on and on. So either way, we go back again here, sales order received, and then the next step is delivery schedule. That's the next immediate step. After sales order management process is done, once the delivery date comes in, based on all our settings, once we have stock available, we run what we call delivery due list in the company, in the selling plant or distribution center. The delivery due list will know when to ship a product and how long does it take to go, and all those various things are considered, and it will create a delivery. And once the delivery gets created, we have WM integration again happen as well. So what happens here, obviously, is so at this point, we create transfer orders again, but in this time for picking purposes. Last time we created transfer orders for put away purposes. Now this time we're creating transfer to pick. So the delivery will basically say, okay, go ahead and this is a product we need based on the master data and configuration that we have set up. It creates transfer order. When the transfer order is taken, and the floor personnel or warehouse personnel go to the respective high rack storage or bulk storage area, pick the product, bring it to the shipping point, and based on all the various transfer orders, the shipment process is a complicated process in warehouse. When I say warehouse within a distribution center. And eventually, the product is, PGI'd, and the transfer order is confirmed, and the product is PGI'd, and the stock really goes out in the truck or a FedEx to the customer, right? Now, when this happens, obviously you saw SD and IM and WM integrates. We also have FI integrates too. At the time of PGI, we reduce our inventory value, right? So we had inventory value up when we received the stock, and now we are reducing inventory, and we're also hitting another account called cost of goods sold. So that we have an FI integration here. Then obviously we have, and depending, like I said, if you have a sales order higher, the stock goes down, when MRP runs, it can also trigger signal again back to the manufacturing facility and all, which starts the whole loop again. And then the billing process, we create invoice with customers, and then we receive funds, and then we update revenue accounts and customer accounts. So I think I ran the last part really quick because we had to, we're past our time here, but and it's a simple high-level overview of how various modules within SAP integrates. Now, like we have integrations with APO to PP to MM to IM to EDI to FI to QM and IM and WM, various points in our business process. The business process example we took is a very simple business process. in order to set this process up for a company, without adding any complexity, standard best practice, we could get it done in 3 to 4 months and up and running. But it has so many modules integrated, and without having proper enterprise structure set up, configuration set up, master data set up, proper training of business users and testing and all those, we can't have a successful implementation of these processes so business can start executing them. Now, like I said, we have APO, we have ECC now. In the near future, we're going to have SAP S4. We have Simple Finance that's already being implemented, and we have SAP S4 ERP coming in the near future. But the process is still the same. The integration between modules is still the same. The tools could be different, but you will see all the elements there anyways. But either way, so we need to wrap up now. But so let's see if I have any questions on the table, and if you guys have any questions, if they can't cover today, we can always email to sap@101erp.com. If you guys are very interested in getting into one of our implementation programs to get involved in all these modules and get an end-to-end understanding of implementing a solution for manufacturing facilities, you're all welcome. You can be a part of our program and all. You can always reach out to SAP 101 ERP to get more in how to enroll and what, all those different things. But either way, let's see if you have any questions on the table here. I'm going to stop recording.